Right then, this is reliability, and this is for A-level psychology. We've obviously already studied this a little bit, but it's just adding a little bit of detail onto what you already know. So, let's start with what is reliability. A quick recap. It's a measure of consistency. So how consistent something is from one time to the next, or between two people. So a measuring device is said to be reliable if it produces consistent results, i.e. the same results every time it is used. So for example, if you use a ruler to measure the height of your cup of tea, if it's the same cup, it should show the same result every single time you use it. And that shows that it's reliable, a reliable measuring device, because it's consistent. In psychology, if we think about the human element a little bit more, you should be able to give somebody an attitude questionnaire more than once and get the same result, unless you've left it too long and they've actually changed their attitude in the meantime. But if you give them the same questionnaire within the space of like 2-3 weeks perhaps, you should get the same result. And that would show that that particular questionnaire is a reliable measuring device, isn't the right word, a reliable tool to use. So there are lots of ways to assess reliability. The first way is test-retest, which I've actually touched on already. And the idea here is that participants take the same test on different occasions. So, for example, if I give you a personality test one week and I give it a month later, you should find that if it's a reliable test, there's a high correlation between the test scores on the two occasions. And the timing is really important. If you leave it so short that participants can remember their answers, that's just pointless, because that won't actually measure the reliability of it. But if you leave it so long, far too long, then you might find that their attitude, behaviour, personality has changed in the meantime. So that's how we can check how consistent or how reliable something is. Right, Interrater reliability then. This is improving the reliability of researchers. So when you're doing an observation, for example, any judgment that you make is subjective. It's your judgment. And this is often the case for observing human behaviour. Things can be interpreted in different ways. If I show you this picture, you might see that as a bored student or a tired one. You see it from your own subjective viewpoint. We've all had different experiences, we've got different expectations. So you have to agree when you're doing an observation about what you're observing, and so you need to use standardized categories. So what we do, there should be a high positive correlation between the scores of different observers observing the same thing. And we're looking for a correlation of at least 0.8, a positive correlation, to say that we've got reliability. And this is called Interobserver reliability. Observers have to agree what they see and carry out on what they see and carry out in the same procedure. They have to agree on it. Interrater reliability might be, you'd have that in content analysis because you're rating something. You could have interviewer reliability. I'll say that again, interviewer reliability, if you're looking at two interviewers doing the same thing, conducting the same interview with different participants. Okay, so one thing that you can do is use a pilot study to check that you've got reliability, and really train the people involved in carrying out your research. So let's talk a little bit more about that, about improving reliability. For questionnaires, what we can do is use the test-retest method. Questions might need rewording. If you get different results for a question, it might be because it's like a bit badly worded, it's maybe a bit ambiguous as to what it means. So that's why someone might answer it different the second time, differently. Or another thing you can do is change open questions to closed ones, and that means that you're much more likely to get the same answer, because open questions can be taken in any direction, and obviously that can be a really good thing, but it can mean that it maybe lowers your reliability a little bit. So that's one way that you can improve it, is using more closed questions. On the other hand, interviews, ideally you would use the same interviewer for each person, but if you're doing a really large scale study, that may not be possible. So it's really important in that case to train all interviewers so that, for example, they don't use leading questions, and so that they are acting in the same way, so that they know what's expected and so on, so that they're all being consistent between them. They can use structured interviews as the best way to get reliability, and that means that it's much easier to avoid leading questions. If you're using an unstructured interview, it's going to be much harder to get a reliable result, because not only can participants go off in any direction they choose, but interviewers may end up, because they're making up questions on the spot and asking questions, they're much more likely to accidentally slip in a leading question of some sort. As you know from when we did memory, it can be the difference between did you see the boy and did you see a boy? Making up that kind of question on the spot, it's not easy to avoid leading questions. So if possible, use a structured interview, and that makes sure you've got a nice, reliable, consistent result. Okay, experiments. Lab experiments have got high control, and that means that their reliability is really good, because you've got everything's measured, everything's controlled. You're much more likely to get the same to carry out the same procedure each time. And in fact, talking about reliability with a lab experiment is more about being able to replicate the method than the finding, and that's really important. Observations, they in terms of improving reliability of observations, the first thing you need to do is make sure your behavioural categories are properly operationalised and measurable, and they don't overlap. So, for example, hugging and cuddling would be an example of overlapping categories. Being happy would be an example of a category that's not measurable, or a bit too vague. So it needs to be, or being aggressive needs to be specific. You know all this already, but these are the things that ensure that it's a good operationalized behavioral categories that lead to a reliably carried out study.